My name is Nikki Honosky, and I'm an Extension Associate. And I work for West Virginia State University. Today, I'm going to show you how to do a small hydroponic system. Now, what is the basic definition of hydroponics? And it's growing without soil. So there are various different types of systems you can do to practice hydroponics. The type I'm going to show you today is called a wick system. The way it works is that you will usually have some type of container, and the plant will remain in a small container above it, hanging suspended, and it will be some kind of wick held between the two of them that will transfer the water and the nutrients that the plant needs to live up to the plant. Okay, so the method I'm going to show you today is a mason jar. So this is just a regular quart mason jar. It's a narrow mouthed one, and it doesn't really matter how wide the mouth is. You can use wide mouth jars as well. The only difference is that you will need a different sized plant container with wides in order for it to be held securely on top of it. For narrow mouth, you need something about 2 inches. For wide mouth, more 3 inches. This is so that while a container may fit this, if you try and transfer it to a wide mouth, it's too small and you'll just end up dropping it right through the gap here. So this right here is just a plain one to start off with. You can leave it this way if you want. The only difference is because you have it completely open, sunlight can easily penetrate through the glass, and your water will then, and your nutrient solution will be constantly in sunlight, and eventually this will cause a bit of a buildup of algae, which you don't want in your water. So you'll have to clean it out every now and then, get rid of the algae, refresh the water, because the water is basically sitting stagnant in the mason jar. So there are a couple of ways to prevent this. One of the ways I'll show here is that we've painted the jar. So you can do it a couple of ways. What we did is we painted it, and then we have these raised levels on the mason jar, and we just sanded off the edge of it. And this makes it so that it's completely covered. The sunlight cannot penetrate it, and there's not really a risk of algae buildup. But because we sanded off these little raised lines, it allows us to have a way to see the water level, check up on it without actually having to lift the plant up and off of it constantly just to peer into it. Another way is before you actually start painting, it's just to take a bit of tape and just put it on vertically, paint over, and then when you're done painting and you've put a coat or however thick you want the paint on it, take the tape off, and that will leave a blank area where you can actually see the water level. So either way works. Another method you can do is to take something like aluminum foil, just completely wrap the bottom of it, cover it up, and that will work just as well. Whatever covering method you would want to test out or try, you can, just as long as you cover up the mason jar or whatever container you're using, and make sure that sunlight cannot get into it easily. This will, like I said, this will prevent an algae buildup, and it's more beneficial for your plant, requires less cleanup in the long run. Okay, so the way we're doing this is I'm going to show you some of the various steps of basically how it will be put together. So while this will hold water, you do not want to fill it all the way up. Roots of plants are not supposed to be completely submerged. The only way you would completely submerge a plant was if it was already an aquatic plant. Otherwise, you need to leave some room. So most containers, if it's not a big container like what I'm going to show you in a bit, then you don't need to have that large of a gap. You'll want to fill it up to almost the rim here. Like I said, you want to leave about like that much of a gap between the top of the jar and your water level. So I'm going to sort of show you how high you need to go. Now, what I'm using is just regular tap water. And that's another precaution you might need to do is check your water. Depending on where you live, if you're using city water, it may be hard water, soft water, anywhere in between. depending on the amount of heavy minerals that could build up in the water. Some of these minerals are a bit negative to plant growth and can stun it and eventually clog up the roots so that it can no longer absorb any nutrients, and in the end your plant would basically starve. So you might want to check up on that, or if you just want to skip the process, you can just use distilled water, because it's practically pure water that way, and you can just add in the minerals that you need and you wouldn't have to worry about it. But for this demonstration purposes, I'm just using regular tap water. So I'm just going to fill up the mason jar. Okay, so it's a little bit of water there, but that's fine. So I'm just going to put there, and that's sort of how much in a mason jar of water you'd want to have in there. Like I said, you don't want to have too much. So depending on the size of your plant container or whatever you're using, this is an 8-quart mason jar. So when we put in fertilizer, you'll want to take that into account. So for about a quart, you want to use about a 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of fertilizer. You'll want to scale that up for larger sizes or scale it down for smaller, depending on what you want to do. So the fertilizer I'm going to use is a type that's water soluble, and it's 15-0-15. So if you don't know, what that means is it's going to dissolve in water, and those 3 numbers represent percentages of the minerals that are in this. In order, it's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. 3 of the largely needed minerals that plants need to survive and stay healthy. The other 3, if you don't know yet, are magnesium, sulfur, and calcium. There are more, but those are the 6 major ones that the plant needs to survive, and it's the ones it needs in large doses. So those 3 numbers are basically the percentages of those first 3. Different fertilizers have different amounts. If you're doing a small, leafy sort of green plant, then 15-0-15 will suit you. I'm going to show you this, assuming you would do something like basil, because that's what I have. And herbs, leafy greens, this will do you fine. Any type like that. If you want to do something more like a flowering plant or anything that produces fruit, you would need a larger amount, and I would recommend something more like 20-20-20, which would provide its needs. Now, the fertilizer you get, you sort of want to check to make sure it has most of the minerals needed, that it completely fulfills the needs of your plant. And if it doesn't, and you can't get a better type in your area, then you can sort of make up for it with substitutes. For instance, I mentioned magnesium and sulfur are 2 of the other 3 needed, and you can substitute that with Epsom salt. You'll just mix in a little bit of that, and that will provide the needs if your fertilizer's missing it, or if you discover your plant has a bit of a deficiency in one of those later on down the line. Okay, so what you want to do is, like I said, it's a teaspoon. This is just a regular small kitchen teaspoon, and I'm just going to get a little bit of fertilizer, dump it in here, and then stir in. You want to ensure that it's stirred in and that you don't have it resting in the bottom. So there you go. It's completely stirred in, and you have your mixture. So this is what you'll be keeping. So when you do this, as your plant grows and it uses water, eventually your water level will go down. So you'll want to keep a constant check on that. Maybe check on it every couple of days, and over time, as the water level decreases, so will its level of fertilizer in it. So as you keep adding new water, that will dilute it further. So if you want to either keep up on that and just change out the water completely, add a little bit in whenever you change a large amount of the water. Or if you want to actually be prepared ahead of time, a way you can do it is to get a container and go on and mix a large amount of fertilizer ahead of time. And just whenever you need to refill it, just get some out and put it in here. And you'll want to keep that container in a cool, dark area. But that's one way of doing it. You'd already have the fertilizer mixed in, and all you'd have to do is get a cup or so of the water out and fill it back up, and you'll be ready to continue on. Okay, so now this is where the steps diverge a little bit. You can't start off a seed in this system. You need to allow it to actually grow outside of it for a bit before you transplant it. Giving it this much, it won't germinate well, and it would stunt growth, I guess would be the way to suggest it. So what you'd want to do is you'd actually want to start your seed somewhere else. So what you can do is you can just get a bit of, you can actually just get your container ahead of time and put your growing medium in it. Now, there are different types of growing mediums available, especially in hydroponics. You don't have to use soil. You can if you want. There's nothing stopping you, but there are also other methods, because the main part this growing medium plays is that it provides support for the plant. So the one that I have is called coconut coir. There are different types: clay pebbles, lava rocks, perlite. These all different types. Some of them are clay pebbles, rocks, a fine mix of minerals. This is made out of the dried outer husk of coconuts, and it's sort of soil-like. But each one has its advantages and disadvantages. What I would actually suggest to be the preferred method is if you take something, do a bit of a mix of it. Coconut coir does well as a mix. You want to do like 50% coconut coir or 50% something else that can sort of counterbalance each other, and like while one might not be able to retain water that well, another might, so they might be able to suit your needs depending on what you want. Anyway, what you want to do is you'll want to take your growing mixture and you'll put it in your container. I'm not going to do that because coconut coir is a bit messy, and you'll actually, because it's so dry, you actually want to wet it a bit ahead of time before you put it in the jar or your container or whatever suits you. And the container I'm using specifically is called a net pot, or you don't have to use exactly this. You can use something called a mesh pot, or you can make your own container. A lot of systems, if you make your own container, you can just take things like plastic cups, or depending on the size, even a red Solo cup, and just cut off the top bit of it, place a hole or two in it for your wick, and it would serve just as well. So whatever you have available that would work, or whatever you would prefer to use. And so you'll do it, and you'll treat it like a thing. You might want to put it, if it has holes in it, you might want to put it in a container so that you don't leak water everywhere. But you'll plant your seed in it. You'll give it unfertilized water. So basically, distilled water would work fine for this. And you'll keep it watered, and you'll let it grow, germinate and grow for 2 to 3 weeks maybe. Just enough that you have a small seedling to start with. Also, before you plant the seed, if you let it soak in water a bit, your germination process may be sped up a bit. So, in the interest of saving time, that you might want to do that. But anyway, you'll have a small seedling, and it's only once you get that small seedling can you put it in the mason jar or your wick system. So, the way this works is that once you have your seedling, you'll take it, and you'll take your wick. So, what I have here is a piece of rope cord. I got it a bit wet right now to make it easier to deal with so that it doesn't fray. But you can use any type of material that you'd want. You can use a piece of ragged cloth, a piece of rope. As long as it is able to absorb the water and nutrient system, then it will be perfectly fine to use as a wick. So what you do is you take your container and you'll feed the wick up through it. It's a bit easier now because I don't have anything in it, but you'll basically feed it up through the bottom. And I like to have a bit extra actually through the pot, sort of wrap around closer to the plant. It's easier for the plant to absorb it that way. You probably don't need as long a piece as this, but you'll put however much in here, and then the rest of it will actually hang suspended like this, as you see, like the one I'm holding. And the way it works is then it'll just be put down in the jar like this. So, and that's how it works basically, is that nutrients, this piece of wick, whatever you may be using, it'll stay constantly wet. It soaks up the water and nutrients, and as the plant needs it, it soaks it up off the wick so that it's constantly fed. And you'll want to check up on it, make sure that it stays soaked, make sure that there's plenty of water level and everything in it. But that's the basics of how to put together a wick system. Now this is just a small system, and it's perfectly fine for smaller plants. I find it good to use for herbs. I've used it for basil, oregano, thyme, anything small and like that. Like I said, small leafy greens will also fit in this. You just have to scale up according to what you'd want to plant. So while this is good for the smaller stuff, the bigger you get, the more impractical this would become. So what you want to do is, if you're going to a larger plant, you would want to go to a larger container. A suitable larger one, if you want to scale up in size, would actually be a 2-liter jar. Not 2 liter, but a 2-liter pot container. Those will work perfectly fine. So the way you'd work with that one is you would cut off the top portion of the 2-liter jar, and you'd invert it, and that would actually serve very well as a plant container, because it would hang suspended. All you would have to do would be to make sure there's some sort of lip in place to hold it. But that would serve well for plants, because you have to remember this, how big the plant is going to get and how heavy it will get. And you have to know that the root system will get extremely enormous. If you want to do a small tomato plant in like 2-liter jar, you would actually see what I'm talking about, because growing hydroponically, the roots get extremely long, and I've had tomato plants with roots up to this long. So you sort of want to adapt to your situation and what you want to grow. If you want to keep getting larger and larger, you need larger and larger containers, and if it's an extremely large plant, it may be suitable to try another method. But like I said, we're just talking about the wick system today, and I hope that this is educational for you, and that you try it and see how well you like it, and you just have fun with it. You can make whatever you want. You can have a whole bunch of these just sitting in your kitchen window, and as the plants end up growing, then it's actually a pretty nice sight to see all those flowering herbs or greens, whatever you want to plant, and it provides a bit of color to your home, and it also provides a source of fresh herbs for you to enjoy. So like I said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I thank you for watching it. Okay, bye.